Epigraphy, one Sanskrit math scholar and the beginning of the study of epigraphy in India. So this, I think, will have connections with what Nandini spoke about a bit on Wednesday. That was that. Yeah, yeah. All right. So Professor Pal, please.
Thank you very much, Professor Shitabro Sinha. And I should thank Professor Shitabro Sinha to invite me to talk in this workshop and address this mixed audience. I was a little bit anxious that what should I talk about. My focus in this paper, my focus is on the methods and researches made on early Indian epigraphy, and I shall take you back to the earliest period, that is the initial period, when nothing about epigraphy was known. Then we had a scholar who was called the Sanskrit mad scholar. This title was given to him. The person is Charles Wilkins, who is the focus of my paper. And this title was given to him by a later scholar, H.T. Colebrook, for his enthusiasm in learning Sanskrit as well as using the language as a tool for understanding epigraphy as well as other literary texts. So I begin with some discussion on how epigraphic data has been So I shall begin my talk with a discussion to how epigraphy has been seen and how epigraphic data has been handled from time to time, and what approaches has been made by historians and epigraphists. So these are both different terms. So what are their implications? I shall begin my talk with this. As regards this differentiation, it was one older school of thought according to which the primary duty of an epigraphist is to primarily edit the inscription, and he should edit the inscription, he should decipher the inscription, he should translate the inscription, he should speak on its language, the script, the grammatical errors, etc. This should be the focus of the epigraphist, and he or she should also analyze the data from the inscription. And what is the primary duty of an historian? The historian's aim is to reconstruct history from the data, and in this process, he or she does not need to be technically sound on the language or on the paleography. That is, he or she should not be technically sound on the language and the script on the inscription. He or she should just analyze the text and place it in the proper historical context, and he or she should compare the different inscriptions or the different data collected from other category of source material in a given area and a period. So, but this type of differentiation between an epigraphist and a historian is not particularly suitable to the current researchers, and it is imperative that while analyzing epigraphic text, one should focus on its authorship, on the audience of the text, and the process of making the text. As for example, Dr. Rajat Sharnal spoke about the Allahabad pillar inscription of Samudragupta. All of us know about the Allahabad pillar inscription of Samudragupta. But if we analyze this from a different approach, we should focus on why Samudragupta has written the inscription on an Ashokan pillar. Very little people know that the inscription was written on an Ashokan pillar, and there are earlier inscriptions of Ashoka on that pillar. So why Samudragupta chose this pillar to write his inscription? Why he did not construct any separate pillar? So there is one suggestion made by Romila Thapar and other historians that actually Samudragupta wanted some sort of continuity as an emperor. Since Ashoka was also an emperor, Samudragupta is also an emperor. So he was claiming some sort of continuity from Emperor Ashoka. This was one of the explanations. So what a historian should do is to he or she should focus on the context of the inscription and the audience of the text. Who are the audience of the text? Since the audience of the literary texts like the Bhagavad Gita or the Puranas, the audience was different. And if we study a temple inscription which is written on a temple wall, or a cave inscription which is written inside a cave, or a pillar inscription, suppose the Rumindai pillar inscriptions of Ashoka, who were the audience? So these are the different issues on which a historian should focus. Now, early Indian texts, including that of epigraphic texts, are often fragmentary. As you can see, all of you know that these are fragmentary. See, this is a scanned page from the Allahabad pillar inscription of Samudragupta, and this is taken from D.C. Sarkar. All of you know about Dinesh Chandra Sarkar, who is also called the father of Indian epigraphy, and he was one of the most prolific writers and the editors of inscriptions, early Indian inscriptions, and he is the author of the several masterpieces on early Indian epigraphy, like Select Inscriptions in 2 volumes, Indian Epigraphy, Indian Epigraphical Glossary. So this is a published text taken from the Select Inscriptions volume 1 by D.C. Sarkar. See, the line 1, line 2, to the this side are the number of lines. Line 1 is damaged. Line 2 is also damaged. Line 3 is also damaged. Line 4, there is a verse in 4 lines in which he has made some conjectural restorations, and he has put them in third brackets. So these third bracketed portions are the conjectural restorations. So this is how a standard epigraphic publication is like this. So the epigraphic data is often fragmentary, and it is the duty of the historian to sift through relevant pieces of information from this kind of data. Again, the reconstruction of history from a set of given data also depends upon the nature of inquiry by the historian. If one wants to reconstruct dynastic history from inscriptions, from epigraphic data, he or she would have to focus on the chronology and the genealogy of the dynasty, their political activities, their conquests. So this would be the focus. But if anyone wants to write social history, the history of society or the societal processes from the epigraphic data, he or she would have to focus on the reference to Varna and Jati, on the reference to different occupational and social groups in the inscriptions. So the focus would be different depending upon the nature of the inquiry of the historian. Now, Ranabir Chakraborty has again shown how epigraphic data provide an alternative perspective, different and at times contradictory from the normative texts. As for example, in the normative texts like the Puranas and the Smriti literature, there are prohibition regarding maritime voyages. But in the Jatakas, we have many references to maritime voyages. So this is how normative texts gave a different perspective of the society, the ideal society, and how epigraphic texts also provide a different perspective, a different kind of data. So there are diverse ways to look at the epigraphic data. Scholars like D.C. Sarkar, the most prolific writer of epigraphy, would like to hold on the superiority of epigraphic data over and above the other category of sources like literature, coins, art and architectural pieces, etc. The merits of the epigraphic data, according to him, are that they record contemporary events and they can be assigned to specific time even if they are undated. As you know that if the inscriptions are undated, that is they do not refer to any regnal year or any era, we can also consider the paleography, and we can approximately date that inscription. So this is one of the merit of the inscription epigraphic data as suggested by D.C. Sarkar. The use of eras reveals sense of chronology. As Rajat has shown you the Hathi Gumfa inscription of Kharavela, which is engraved inside the Udayagiri cave, and it records the year by year activity of King Kharavela, which speaks of the chronological sense of the composer of the inscription. But there are demerits of the epigraphic data are the exaggeration, the false claim made for patrons by their court poets, the use of conventional concepts like the Chakravarti Kshetra. Now this Chakravarti Kshetra. Do you know about the Chakravarti Kshetra? What is the definition of the Chakravarti Kshetra? We find the reference to Chakravarti, this concept, in the later Vedic texts. So, can anyone tell me what is the concept? Because this concept was used by several composers of the Prashastis, the eulogies. So, can you tell me what is the concept of Chakravarti Kshetra? Chakravarti is the emperor. Chakravarti Kshetra is a domain, the domain of the sovereign. So, this domain, there are certain limits suggested for this domain, like there are the Himalayas, the mountain to the north, the Vindhyas to the south. Sometimes the south extends towards the seas. So, this is an imaginative domain of the emperor, the sovereign. This is the concept of the Chakravarti Kshetra, and one who rules over who has authority over the Chakravarti Kshetra is the Shamrat. So, this is the concept presented in the later Vedic text, and it was followed by several subsequent literature in the subsequent period. Now, this concept was used by the composers of the inscriptions, and when any court poet is writing the eulogy of his patron king, he would present his patron king as the Chakravarti king, the owner of the authority, one who has authority over the Chakravarti Kshetra. So, this is more or less a conventional claim, and we should not take it literally. On the whole, it cannot be denied that handling of epigraphic data requires technical knowledge like paleography, and moreover the language, again doubtful and conjectural restoration of damaged and missing lines, as I have shown you, of inscriptions by their editors is another major problem of epigraphy. In this talk, I would like to discuss the initial period, as I have already told you, of the study of Indian epigraphy in our country, and to understand what kind of methods was adopted to analyze the epigraphic data in the initial period. The study of Indian epigraphy was at its infancy in the late 18th century. The initial phase began with the discovery of inscriptions and their publications by European scholars, apparently with the help of Indian Pandits. They appeared in journals like the Asiatic Researches and the Journal of the Asiatic Society. Amongst this journal, these are not exclusively on epigraphy. Amongst this journal, the Asiatic Researches is the earliest, which was first published in 1788. The foundation of researches in Indian epigraphy was thus laid, and in this process of building interest in Indian epigraphy, the name of Charles Wilkins, 1749 to 1836, stands out most prominently. Wilkins was amongst the earliest scholars who deciphered inscriptions at a period when those epigraphic records were unintelligible to the others. None could read the script. How Wilkins made it possible is unknown, but to him epigraphy was more a tool to understand the language. The reconstruction of history from epigraphic data was not his aim, rather his aim was the study of the Sanskrit language. In 18th and 19th century Europe, the study of Sanskrit and other Oriental languages and Indian antiquities was widely prevalent, and the idea behind it was to bring an Oriental Renaissance similar to the Renaissance in Europe brought about by the Greek letters. Calcutta became the center of this new Orientalism, focusing on Sanskrit language and literature. Under the leadership of Sir William Jones, Wilkins was a pioneer in this movement. In 1784, Wilkins was one of the small band of company servants who founded the Asiatic Society in Calcutta with William Jones as its president. His publication in the first volume of the Asiatic Researches, these are the three articles published by Charles Wilkins, and these are the earliest inscriptions to be deciphered. This initiated the modern study of Indian epigraphy. A discussion of the approach of Wilkins towards the study of inscriptions might be useful in understanding the methodology of studying inscriptions in this initial phase. His three articles mentioned here can help us towards this understanding. The inscriptions upon which he worked are the Munger copper plate and the Badal inscriptions, both belonging to the Palas. The Munger copper plate belongs to Devapala, who belongs to the first half of the 9th century, and the Badal pillar inscription belongs to Narayanapala, who belongs to the last quarter of the 9th to the mid 10th century. Wilkins also deciphered the Nagarjuni Hill inscription, which Rajat has shown you. I will also show you the picture. The Munger copper plate of Devapala. This is the estampage of the Munger copper plate of Devapala. Wilkins did not deal with this estampage. This is a later estampage. The Munger copper plate of Devapala was the first Sanskrit inscription to be deciphered. In 1780, this copper plate inscription was found by Cornel Watson at Munger town. It had been deciphered by Wilkins in 1781 and published in the first volume of the Asiatic Researches in 1788 with a translation and a lithographed facsimile. This is the lithographed facsimile. This is the system how inscriptions were published in this initial period. There was no system of photography. Wilkins made an eye copy and then it was transferred to this lithograph. But in these lithographs, all the letters did not come out correctly. As you can see, this is the seal. This is the seal, and it is written here, Sri, since this copper plate belongs to Devapala, Sri Devapala Devasya, it is very unclear in this estampage, but this did not come out very clearly and correctly in the lithograph. So, this was the problem of the lithographs. At the beginning, Wilkins correctly, now let us discuss how Wilkins interpreted the inscription. There is a reference to Sugata, that is the Buddha in the beginning of the inscription. As you can see, the inscription begins with Om Swasti, then Siddharthasya, here it begins from here, Siddharthasya, Parartha, Susthira Mate, Sanmargamabhasyatas, Siddhi Manuttaram, Bhagavatas Tasya, Prajasu Kriyat, Yas Traidhatuka, Sattva Siddhi, Padaviratyugra, Virodaya, Jitva, Nirvriti, Masasad, Sugata, Sarvartha, Gumishvara. Sugata is the Buddha, and since the Palas were Buddhists, they made reference to Sugata at the very beginning of the verse. So, Wilkins correctly identified Sugata with a philosopher, that is the Buddha, although he does not mention his name. His identification of mythical, there are reference to certain kings in these inscriptions who are the mythical kings like Prithu, Sagara, about whom we find mention in the Mahabharata and the other early Indian texts. Prithu, Sagara, he identified them correctly, and this shows his profound knowledge in Puranic texts. The mention of the Brahmanical pilgrimage sites like Kedara, Gokarna, it is mentioned in these inscriptions that the Pala king like Dharmapala and Devapala, they paid pilgrimage, they went to these places of pilgrimage like Kedara and Gokarna. So, Wilkins was very curious that since they were Buddhist, why should they go to the places of Hindu pilgrimage? But the Pandit who helped him in this translation explained that it is like taking oath by a Muslim, by a Quran, and a Hindu by the water of the Ganges in the court, although the Europeans did not believe in any of this religion. His knowledge of geography was, however, poor, since he took Vindhya as the mountain on the continent near Ceylon and Kamboja as Kambe, etc. He rightly located Srinagara in Patna, and Mudgagiri was identified with Munger, which is correct, since these were the places of land grant and had to be located in the vicinity of its find spot. Now we come to the Badal pillar inscription. This is the picture of the pillar which is broken. The Badal pillar had been discovered by Charles Wilkins in November 1780 in a jungle in the vicinity of the town of Badal, which is in the old Dinajpur district. Now it is in Bangladesh, in this Mongolbari in the Naugao district of Bangladesh. It was a 12 feet high monolithic pillar. This is the drawing which Wilkins made, and here there is the inscription. This is the Prashasti. It was a 12 feet high monolithic stone pillar. The inscription was engraved on the pillar at a few feet above the ground. He took its dimension, he made its drawing, and he engraved a plate very soon. This is the plate which was published in the Asiatic Researches in 1788. He published a translation of this pillar inscription, and in 1785, on 14th July, in a letter, he writes to William Jones that he was fortunate to decipher the character and presented a transcript and a translation to the society, but there was no transcript in the published article because there was difficulty in that period in the 18th century to publish a Sanskrit inscription because there were no font, and the system of adding diacritics and writing the Sanskrit text was not known in that period. So, there was difficulty in publishing the text or the transcript of the inscription. The only the eye copy, the drawing, and the lithograph and the translation was published in the volume of the Asiatic Researches. The inscription had been freshly edited by Kilhorn in volume 2 of the Epigraphy Indica in 1894 and again by Akshay Kumar Moitra in 1912. A comparison of the three editions may help us in understanding how far Wilkins was successful in understanding the inscription. Moitra points out that the pillar actually is a Garuda pillar. The inscription contains 9 lines in verse, and the characters, as you can see, are very bold characters, and they have the, what kind of script is it? Can you identify? As Rajat has already shown this. You can see the matras, and what kind of matras are these? Rajat has spoken about the Siddha Matrika script. So, see the bold matras, see the flourishes. He has very beautifully explained this. So, we can also place the inscription in an approximate date. The most remarkable achievement, now we go to the next inscription. This is the most remarkable achievement of Charles Wilkins, that is the decipherment of the inscriptions of the Maukharis in the 6th century. This inscription is engraved inside a cave in the Nagarjuni hill near Gaya, and the inscription is obviously in 6th century character, which the dynastic name would be the Gupta character, and if we do not want to use the dynastic name, it would be late Brahmi. So, this is the inscription. Wilkins could read the inscription more or less correctly, and he published the inscription. We do not know how he was able to read this inscription because it is a very early period, late 18th century, and none could read the script. Even the name of the script was not known then. So, how Wilkins was able to read it, it is very difficult to ascertain. Wilkins presented to the society a copy of the inscription, and the letter was accompanied, he also made this copy in which the first line is the inscription and the corresponding line is in Devanagari. I will show you more clearly. See. Unnidrasya, this is written in 6th century character, late Brahmi, immediately before the beginning of the Siddha Matrika. Unnidrasya sa ro ru hasya sa ka la ma kshipya sho vang ru cha, and this is also accompanied by the corresponding script in Devanagari. So, this is how Wilkins made this publication. Moreover, this is written in verse, he identified the meter as Shardulo Vikririto, and this helped him in deciphering some vowels. I will show you how the chandas, the identification of chandas or Sanskrit meters can lead us to the identification of some of the aksharas made in the inscriptions. Another inscription on a stone of Bodh Gaya had been translated by Wilkins in the same volume without the text and the impression. This he was again successful in deciphering by 1785. It records the foundation of the Vishnupada temple in Bodh Gaya. In the second volume of the Asiatic Researches, Wilkins published translations of 2 more inscriptions of the Moukharis from the Nagarjuni caves. This suggests that he could master the ability to read the 6th century characters quite well by that period, and it was later, at least 50 years after this discovery by this decipherment by Wilkins, that the Allahabad pillar inscription of Samudragupta was finally read. We must keep in mind that in 1785, Wilkins published the English translation of the Bhagavad Gita also. This means that his decipherment of these 3 inscriptions, that is the Munger copper plate of Devapalo, the Badal pillar inscription and the Nagarjuni hill inscriptions discussed here, went side by side with it. His extensive works on translation of Sanskrit text, the establishment of printing presses in Bengal, which is his another achievement, have however overshadowed the brilliant achievement of this man in this field of epigraphy. It has often been pointed out that the early Europeans practically monopolized the academic studies in India in this period, since they dominated the institutions like the Asiatic Society, the premier institution carrying on researches on Indology in this period. They rarely mentioned the Indian Pandits from whom they learnt the language, and it has further been pointed out that these Indian Pandits were the actual decipherers of the inscriptions, not the Europeans like Charles Wilkins. This does not appear to be true in this particular case of Charles Wilkins. It is true that the Indian Pandits were conversant with manuscripts, but all these manuscripts of literary texts belong to the post 15th or 16th century period. That is, the Pandits could handle the 16th century or 17th century texts, but these inscriptions are much early. They belong to the 6th century, the 9th century, the 10th century. So how could the Pandits actually could not read this? Reference has been also made to Pandit Kashinath Bhattacharya of Benares, who was famous among the Brahmin Pandits, and he was known to the Orientalists of Calcutta before Wilkins moved to Benares. Later Wilkins moved to Benares for learning Sanskrit. This Kashinath Bhattacharya also supplied manuscripts to Nathaniel Halhed, and who wrote the grammar of Bengali language. Kashinath has also written about his contact with Wilkins while the latter was in Benares to study the scriptures. However, whereas Kashinath's role in teaching Sanskrit to Wilkins, assisting him in translating Brahmanical texts like the Bhagavad Gita, is obvious and finds mention in the writing of other European scholars also, his role, whether any in the decipherment of inscriptions, is not clear to us. So in such circumstance, it goes without saying that the credit of the decipherment of inscriptions should solely go to Charles Wilkins. In the beginning of the 19th century, H.T. Colebrook introduced the practice of publishing the text of the inscriptions together with a facsimile reproduction, and thus set the methodology of publication of inscriptions. He also added the introductory remarks to his publication of inscriptions in the Asiatic Researches volume 9 in 1807, situating its historical importance. Epigraphic researches saw many more advancement in the for the years to come. The interest in the study of Indian epigraphy, as also in the inscriptions of Southeast Asia, gradually became more extensive. More and more publications came. In 1801, J.H. Harrington published a book of drawings and inscriptions, which had copies of Delhi and the Allahabad pillar inscriptions. By 1833, so many copies of inscriptions had been acquired by the Asiatic Society that it was feared that they might be mislaid or lost sight of. Prinsep thus began to publish a long series of facsimiles of inscriptions in the Journal of the Society from 1836 to 1838. Finally, in 1837 came the great discovery of James Prinsep of the decipherment of Ashokan Brahmi script, which practically overshadowed the previous accomplishments made in this field. Now, how did Wilkins decipher the ancient characters? The Munger and the Bad, I will now show you a comparison of letters which I have made. This table shows a comparison of letters in this column. It is the Nagarjuni Hill inscription which belongs to the 6th century. In this column, the Munger copper plate of Devpalo which belongs to the 9th century. Here the Badal pillar inscription of the 10th century, the modern Bengali script and the Devanagari script. Here I have presented the vowels. See, the A in the Badal pillar inscription. You cannot make comparison since these two are not present in the other two inscriptions. So, we shall move to the consonants. See, these are the consonants. See the Ka, as for example, see the Ka in Nagarjuni Hill inscription. Then the 9th century, I will just tell you the dates. The 6th century inscription, the 9th century inscription, the 10th century inscription and the modern script. See if there are any similarity, you can notice. The 9th century and the 10th century, the Ka is more or less similar, but in the 6th century, this is very dissimilar. And also study the other letters like Kha. Kha is more or less similar in all the three inscriptions of 6th, 9th and the 10th century. You can also compare the other letters. See, for example, Dha. Dha is similar. We are trying to see how Wilkins deciphered the most ancient script, that is the 6th century script, since it was a path-breaking achievement. See the form of Na. This is entirely different in the 6th century, whereas it is also different in 9th and 10th century inscriptions. See the form of Ma. This is more or less similar in the 6th century, in the 9th century and the 10th century. The Ya, which is again dissimilar with the later forms like 9th and 10th century. The Ra, which is more or less again similar. The La, Va, the palatal Sha, the dental Sa and Ha. So, how did Wilkins decipher the ancient characters? The Munger and the Badal inscriptions are written in 9th and 10th century Siddhamatrika characters, when regional features of the scripts of Eastern India was about to appear, and thus if anyone was quite conversant with modern Bengali script, which Wilkins of course was, since he prepared the first movable type fonts for Bengali alphabet, so he could easily, not easily, but he could read the inscription. It is not altogether impossible. So, he could read the Badal pillar inscription and the Munger cover plate, although to us it would be very difficult if we do not know the language and also the context. See, if we do not know the language and the modern form of the script, we would not be able to read this. But if we know it, we can easily identify the different aksharas. Not that we can identify each and every akshara, but we can more or less identify some of the aksharas. Can you identify any? See, this is Sa, Sa, and then there is Ka. So, we can, if we try, we can identify some of the aksharas, but not all the aksharas. So, we do not know how Wilkins was able to read this. Then the Badal pillar inscription. Sorry, this is not clear at all. See this? If we do not know the name of the script, the period of the inscription, it is very difficult to read this. We do not also know that how Wilkins was able to read this. Can you identify at least any one of the letter akshara? Yes, where it is? This is the ja. And anyone else? Can you please show it? Can you please come here? Sorry. Yes, exactly. And any other? Anyone else? You can identify the laws also. The va. Yes, ka. Ka is very easy. But we cannot read the whole of the inscription. So it is very difficult to ascertain how Wilkins was able to read this. Now the probable hint to the decipherment by Wilkins. As we have already discussed that apart from acquaintance and in-depth knowledge of the modern Indian scripts like Bengali or Devanagari, the knowledge of Sanskrit meters or chanda also could have been of great help to the process of decipherment of the inscriptions. For the text, I have already shown you a text published by D.C. Sarkar. Now I will show this slide again. Sorry. See, here D.C. Sarkar has made restorations of some of the aksharas and he has put some of them in the third bracket. Like here in line 4, you can see sfu, sfuradha, then a question mark. So, if we, this is a poetical composition made by Harisheno, who was a famous poet, and this is written in classical Sanskrit meters. Like D.C. Sarkar has also identified the meters, the chandas, like in verse 3, it is Sraddhara, in verse 4, it is Shardula Vikririta. All these are classical Sanskrit chandas or meters which follow specific patterns. I will show you. Then there is Mandakranta. He has identified the chandas. So, if we now take verse, this verse, each of them has 4 lines, line 1, 2, 3 and 4. From line 5, the verse begins, verse 1, line 1 of the verse, line 2 of the verse, line 3 of the verse and line 4 of the verse. Here it ends. After line 1 and 2, there is a single line and there is the double line, Jati Chinna, in the last line of the verse. So, this line was clear, it was not damaged. Yasya pragyatu, here it was also not, again not clear. Shango Chita, Sukha, Manasa, Shastra, Tattva, Tva was again not clear, but he has made restoration, the Vartu. Then here these signs are actually the Laghu and Guru identification of each of the aksharas. Do anyone know about the Laghu and how to identify Laghu and Guru in Sanskrit chanda or Sanskrit syllables? It is very useful hint to the decipherment of inscriptions. Yes, please. Exactly. Yes. And I'll show you this for everyone. I'll show you this. These are the 6 parameters for identification of the Laghu and Guru. Yes, you please carry on. You may carry on.
Okay. So the karika is like sanuswarascha dirghascha visargicha gurur bhavet varna sanyoga purvascha tatha padanto gopyava. So in that it enlists criteria. First is with anuswara, the word alphabet
And
or
visarga.
character should be with anuswara.
Yes.
It should be a dirgha. Either it should be a dirgha. It should have visarga, and it the alphabet before the varna sanyoga becomes guru, and at the end it should the end of the verse the character becomes guru.
Guru, yes. So now let us study this together. How to identify the Laghu vowels. The Laghu are light vowels are A, E, U, Ri and Li. And the Guru vowels are the long vowels A, Dirgha I, Dirgha Ri, etc. The long vowels are the Guru vowels. And there are other parameters to identify the Laghu and the Guru vowels, like the Anuswara and Visarga is always marked as Guru, and any letter which is followed by a conjunct letter yuktakshara, that is would also be considered as the Guru vowel. So in every Sanskrit text, we can actually transform a line into a sequence of Laghu and Guru vowels, Laghu and Guru aksharas, sorry. So this sequence of Laghu and Guru markers are again called ganas. Ganas are actually triplet of syllables. 3 syllables make a gana. So there are 8 patterns of gana. These 8 patterns are ya, ra, ta, na, ma, ja, sa, ma. So the patterns are, the lakshana of ya gana is, it would be la, ga, ga. That is, it should contain the first akshara would be Laghu, the second akshara would be Guru, and then the third akshara would be Guru. So this is the lakshana of ya gana. Then the ra gana, it would be, the first akshara would be Guru, then the middle akshara would be Laghu, and the last akshara would be Guru. So these are the 8 ganas and with specific lakshanas. Now, how to identify meters or Sanskrit chandas? Now, I have written for you the Shardula Vikririta Chanda, this is also the beginning, the very introductory verse of the Munger copper plate of Devapala. As I have already shown you, this begins with Siddharthasya. We would not consider this beginning on Sasti because this is not the part of the verse. The verse actually begins from Siddharthasya. Siddharthasya parartho susthira mate. Now I have written this first verse for you and analyze the Laghu Guru aksharas. See? Siddhartha, this is one gana 1. Then Sya, Pa, Ra, you can make the division of the ganas in your copies. Siddhartha, each line can be divided into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6 triplets, and that would be followed by a single letter which is the end of the line, and that should be always a Guru swar. So, how to identify them? Here the sequence is C. Why C is a Guru swar? Because it is followed by a conjunct, dha. So, C is Guru, Dha is again Guru because it is a long vowel A. Then Tha. Why this is Guru? Because it is followed again by a conjunct, Sya. So, if one akshara is followed by a conjunct, it becomes Guru. So, the first sequence is G, 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 Guru, Guru, Guru. So, we would again go to the table of Lakshana. Ga, ga, ga. Ga, ga, ga is the Lakshana of Ma, Gana. Okay. Ga, ga, ga is the Lakshana of Ma, Gana. So, there are patterns for other ganas also. I will share this PowerPoint with you. Now, you can identify these ganas. The sequence of gana is Ma, Gana. Since 3 are Guru, you can identify the rest of the letters. Then this is followed by Sa Gana, then this is followed by Ja Gana, then this is followed by again Sa, then again Ta Gana, then again Ta, and last is Ga. So, Ma, the sequence of ganas is Ma, Sa, Ja, Sa, Ta, Ta, and the last single letter is always considered as Guru. So, Ma, Sa, Ja, Sa, Ta, Ta, Ga, Guru. So, this is again the Lakshana of the Shardula Vikrita Chanda. There are specific patterns of the Sanskrit chandas as written in the text Chanda Manjuri. I will share the PDF of the text with you also. So, there are specific patterns of the Sanskrit meters, like the Lakshana of Shardula Vikrita Chanda is the ganas would be Masa, the sequence of ganas would be Masa, Jasa, Tata, Ga. So, these can be identified as the Shardula Vikrita Chanda, and if you have not the exact aksharas, you can restore them as D.C. Sarkar has restored them in this way, Laghu, Guru, because he has already identified the meter, the chanda as Sragdhara. So, according to the pattern suggested regarding the chanda Sragdhara, he has made these suggestions regarding the letters, the damaged part of the letters. So, in this way, if the letters are damaged, you can always guess what letters should be there. Of course, you would also have to consider the context of the inscription, whether they are speaking about the genealogy, the political activities, or whether they are speaking about any other issues. So, you have to also consider that. But by this system of identification of chandas and Sanskrit meters, we can guess the damaged letters of the inscriptions, and this was most probably what Wilkins did in deciphering the inscriptions of Anantavarman. This is my suggestion. I do not know. Anyone have not, anyone could not, no one could not could understand how Wilkins deciphered the inscription of 6th century inscription. Even Richard Solomon, who published a book on Indian epigraphy, he has also said that this is a sheer genius that Wilkins could decipher the 6th century inscription, but we could not understand how he was able to decipher the inscription. So, now I would end my talk with a review of the or the response of the later scholars regarding the discovery of Charles Wilkins. Wilkins' decipherment of the Nagarjuni Hill inscription of Anantavarman and how it influenced the later researches into Indian epigraphy. Wilkins' decipherment of the Nagarjuni Hill inscription of Anantavarman provided a key to the understanding of the characters in the later years. T.S. Burt, who was trying to read the Allahabad pillar inscription, writes in the Society's Journal in 1834. 1834 was the period when the Allahabad pillar inscription finally got deciphered. This transcript and the interpretation of an ancient inscription from Goya by Wilkins, published in the Asiatic Researches, Volume 1, will evidently serve as a guide by which nearly half of the letters can be made out. So, now we can see that how Wilkins helped in the subsequent decipherment of the epigraphs, like these famous epigraphs like the Allahabad pillar inscription of Samudragupta. But we do not remember him actually. We all of us know about the name of James Prinsep. We have not remembered Charles Wilkins properly. However, after Wilkins' decipherment, there was still difficulty in reading the Gupta characters. Prinsep writes in 1834, none of our Orientalists have yet been able to make anything of the Vilsa or Sachi inscription, although they are far from abandoning their attempts to decipher it. In the same volume of the Society's journal, Captain A. Troyer published a translation of the Allahabad pillar inscription of Samudragupta, which was, however, very preliminary. In the Centenary Review of Archaeology, History and Literature of the Society, Asiatic Society, F.R. Hornley points out that the discovery of Kutilo and Gupta characters are of great consequence. The text of the Badal pillar was published in 1874 by Pratap Chandra Ghosh. This shows that the need to publish the text of the inscription was felt almost 100 years later, when the methodology to deal with the publication of the inscriptions became more and more regular and standardized. Thus, in the midst of this scenario of the study of Indian epigraphy in the last quarter of the 18th century, where do we situate the single endeavor of this genius scholar? In Centenary Review of the Researches of the Asiatic Society, Rajendra Lal Mitra points out that the establishment of the Asiatic Society was aimed at organized effort under the aegis of an institution. Inscriptions, in his view, are more authentic than the books. This is how scholars gradually came to understand the value of the inscriptions and their role in the reconstruction of history. The society was engaged in the decipherment of inscriptions, but as it was much difficult to get the originals, and sometimes it was impossible to get the originals since they were located in remote areas, in jungles or caves. The decipherment largely depended on facsimiles, which is not always very authentic. The period between 1781 to 1834 has been regarded as the pioneering era which initiated the early reading of Indian inscriptions. The methodology of publishing inscriptions, the identity of the characters mentioned therein, their period, nothing was clear in that time. In this circumstance, the scholars who showed interest in their interpretation can of course be regarded as pioneers, and as it would not be inappropriate to say that Charles Wilkins stand as the foremost amongst them by initiating the reading of this unknown script. So by this, I end my talk, and thanks for a patient hearing.
Thank you, Professor Pal. Questions, comments? Yeah.
And this is the Allahabad Prashasti of Samudragupta, and it is in Shakdhara. Then did you see any other in the meters? Then did you see any other inscription in the meters, or they are just Gadya? Or
There are several inscriptions which are entirely in verse, like the Prashastis or the eulogies are always entirely in verse. There will be one or two lines in prose at the end, as like the Allahabad pillar inscription is entirely in verse, and at the end there are two lines of prose. But there are copperplate charters which record land grants, in which the introductory portion, the eulogy part, is in verse, since the Prashastis were always composed in verse. It was the standard. And then the functional part, like the donation part, which were, where land was donated, the location of the land, the measurement of the land, the price of the land, all these were mentioned in prose. So in copperplate charter, we have a mixture of prose and verse, and in Prashastis, we usually have verses, but in the end portion, we can have one or two line proses also.
okay, what I mean is the first in the early label inscription and the Ashoka inscriptions are in Gadya format, and the later most of the Sanskrit inscriptions, I think after 3rd century onwards, they have a practice of writing in meters. Am I correct?
Yes.
During
Correct.
the Gupta period?
It's from 2nd century that we see
Which one is the first one?
Rudradaman's
It is
Junagadh
the-
inscription is the earliest evidence of proper poetic refined Sanskrit use with extensive use of verse in it. So precisely from 2nd century CE, we see the use of proper poetic Sanskrit in meter, poetic Sanskrit and in meter with the use of the verse. From 2nd century CE, Rudradaman's Junagadh inscription is the earliest specimen.
It is in which meter he used?
Several meters
Several
were
meters,
used in
No,
it,
in
starting from
Rudradaman's
Shardula
play. In the
Vikradita.
Rudradaman's play.
Yes, even in
Yeah, he
Rudradaman's
used
period.
several.
Many of the meters were
Okay.
these
Thank you.
meters were
Thank you very much.
used.
Thank you, ma'am, for this beautiful presentation, which also underlines that as an epigrapher, one must know the language and have basics of shastras also, like
That
Chanda
was the
Shastra.
opinion of Professor D.C. Sarkar, who never made translations of the inscriptions.
And now coming to the question, actually, we, as earlier talks on epigraphy also, which underline the contribution which is like hidden of Indian Pandits. So in case of Wilkins, we are unable to recognize who helped him, but where should we look for? Like we know that British had a habit to maintain diaries and all. Do we find such diaries in any way?
For the particular case of Charles Wilkins,
Yes.
I have searched. I could only find some of the unedited letters, but there is no, he has just written that I have been able to decipher the inscriptions, but how he could decipher it is not written. And also in the standard curriculum of Sanskrit, as it was taught in the tolls in 18th century, in 19th century, the inscriptions never formed a part of the curriculum of the Sanskrit learning in our country. And also we could also remember in this connection that in 14th century, Firoz Shah Tughlaq called all the Pandits to read inscription on a Ashokan pillar, but none could read it. So the inscription, the topic, the inscription is entirely absent from the curriculum on Sanskrit taught in our country. So this is the difficulty.
Colonialistic mentality or what? Like not giving credit to Indians for that. What is your take? Yeah, I mentioned, but
I could not understand your question actually.
Can you say that again? The question.
okay. Wilkins mentions that he deciphered the script,
Yes.
and I guess is it a colonialistic practice not to give credit
Yes,
to
exactly.
Indians?
No, yes. It was a colonialist practice, but Wilkins also did not mention how he learned Sanskrit from Kashinath Bhattacharya. He also did not. But regarding the decipherment, to me, I don't think that any Pandit could read that script. So, in this particular case of decipherment of inscription, I would better give the credit entirely to Charles Wilkins.
I just add a piece of information from southern India. In the 16th century, the Mysore palace had a complete survey of inscriptions in the Mysore kingdom undertaken before the British came here. So essentially, they had in the court a repository of every inscription within the Mysore kingdom, which essentially meant they had the ability to read in the 16th century, at least. So there are instances, and the other point that he was making, what are your
What
sources?
is the date you mentioned? 18th century.
Sorry? 16th.
16th century.
16.
Before-
Before Fleet or before Princep or any of these people. And the second point is about sources of information, fundamentally manuscripts. And there are millions of manuscripts sitting out there which haven't been studied for what Indians had written about, studied about, and all of that. So that's a Pandora's box yet to open up.
Exactly. But has it been published, the repository of inscriptions which you mentioned?
So that was, the palace got burned down, and we have a record that it got burned down. Subsequently, why they started another survey in the Mysore kingdom, which was by the British thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank
So it is written by by B.L. Rice, who is the equivalent of Princep or any of those here in the southern. This one.
Thank you for that.
So during this burning of the palace, all those things got destroyed, you're saying?
Correct. It used to be a wooden palace,
Right.
so that it lost
The
all.
burning of the
lost.
palace I know about.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it was during the princess's wedding, I think, some fireworks.
I think this is the second incident. There was an earlier one.
This is
Typically,
earlier
they
one.
would be in wooden.
Okay, I see. All right. Devesh, in response to your thing about whether diaries exist and so on, so there's a very interesting anecdote I was reading about. So Thomas Young, whom I mentioned, who gave one of the vital clues for deciphering Egyptian hieroglyphics. So there is a recent biography of him by Andrew Robinson, the same guy who wrote Story of Writing. So Andrew Robinson says that he tried to look at Thomas Young's journals, which people know existed and were kept in the British archives, but when he went to check it, they were declared as lost. So the only way that he could access them is through a 19th century biography of Thomas Young, which quotes extensively from his journals. So even in England, things do get lost, which were originally in the archives.
Just one more angle to this. Fake copperplate inscriptions are extremely common. So counterfeits, often like about 500, 800 year old, this one, have been copied as, by Pandits, Munshis, etc., to make appropriate land in a much later time. So there's another instance of how ancient reading was prevalent there. So we have 17th century, 18th century fakes, which actually try to mimic 8th, 9th century scripts. And because of the language there, they get caught as fakes now. Some small mistake here, there, mention of a name there, an error in the date and things like that.
All right, so if there are no further questions, oh, sorry, there's a question there. Can you please speak in the mic? Yeah.
Could you explain when was Upadmaniya is first seen in epigraphy? Upadmaniya.
Sorry.
Upadmani. Upadmaniya side.
This is not exactly related to this talk, actually.
I mean Siddha Matrikao
Yes.
later period.
Siddhamatrika is written from 6th to the 10th century.
Actually, in inscriptions, Jemamulias and Upadmaniyas are being regularly used from early Siddhamatrika phase itself from 7th century. Now we can identify them with specific RTI softwares and record them record them in black and white, the use of the Jemamulias and Upadmaniyas in early Siddhamatrika.
All right, so if there are no further questions, let's thank Professor Pal for a wonderful talk once more. And now we break for lunch, and please be back here by 2 to listen to Ashok.